Welcome into the Dynasty After Party here at Club Fantasy FFL. My name is Michael Sicoli. We are here. Oh, I know Joel's not quite on with me right now, but he's going to be in a second. And we have been chomping at the bit to talk about these wide receivers in the 2024 draft class. Listen, we've gone through the running backs. We ate our veggies. We went through the quarterback. They're all good. All good, but nothing like this wide receiver class. So we're so excited to dive into the best of the best. And a lot of those guys that in this draft class, we're going to have so much day 2 value, even day 3 value. So we're going to get into all those names in just a bit here on the Dynasty After Party with Club Fantasy FFL, which, if you can't tell, for all you lovely listeners, I did not have the 30-second intro lined up for this. I say 30 seconds, but I mean 10 seconds. It's a 10-second intro. But either way, Joel, thank you for joining me here today. It's always good to see your wonderful face. But today, when we're talking about wide receivers, I was just saying before the show, it feels like the Super Bowl of offseason content with how great this group of wide receivers
are. Very much so, yeah. No question. I said on the show before, I think this is the best class since at least 2014, and I think it's probably a better class than going into the draft. Obviously, a lot of those guys turned out, but I think this is a better class of prospects than 2014 was. So yeah, pretty stacked, pretty fun to talk about.
Yeah, no, it's always good when we can start off with 3 names that we can almost breeze right past because we view them as top tier, not many flaws in their game. We'll get into that in a second. Good to see Gator tuning in as always. Be sure to check out Mock with the Stars with Gator on Monday. Always love to see it. And to be honest, I'll be honest with you, Joel, here. Gator, best hosting voice in the game. I just got to say, he's got the voice. He's got the voice. This man should be, should be on every radio channel all at the same time. Tyler Binkley, good to see you in the chat here. Can't wait to talk about Brian Thomas Jr. and Adonai Mitchell. Me too, for one of them. And we'll get into which one. If you tuned into the Run Back show, I kind of alluded to it. One of those guys is one of my favorites. The other one, I think I'll fight a little bit on Joel on, but we'll see. Either way, Joel, I say with how deep this class is, we just jump almost right into it. I say we just go for it. I say we go right into this class.
Why not? There's no reason not to.
Okay, well, there we go. See, now we're off to a good start already. So, without further ado, let's start at the top. And with no surprise, with no confusion, Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State, the type of prospect that we don't need to spend much time on. In the same sense of last year, we didn't need to spend much time on Bijan Robinson. I mean, a few years ago, we didn't need to spend much time on Jamar, or if we had the show, we didn't need to spend much time on Jamar Chase. These guys are Marvin Harrison Jr. is a can't-miss prospect. I assume you feel the same way.
Yeah, it's really easier to talk about what he doesn't do well because it's such a short list. Like he's he's Devontae Adams level blocker in the run game. He just doesn't care, not going to get involved. And I don't care either. If you don't want to, I don't care. Just go be the best receiver in the league. I don't care if you want to block. He can be a little, like, to get real technical, he can be a little kind of indecisive at the top of his routes. And I think that's probably just because he's so damn good. He just doesn't know which way to go, right? It's like, I could go this way. I could go that way. That'll get coached out of him. So yeah, dude's just an absolute terror. He's uncoverable. And like, if you watch his tape, like last year, Kyle McCord was so ass that it just.
Oh my God, yeah.
Specifically, like I remember the Wisconsin game where there were just so many times where like Harrison was just running wide open and McCord just either didn't look at him or either pulled the trigger, just on something else too late or too early or too late. It was just embarrassing how bad that was. I mean, that could have been just an absolute blowout. Should have been an absolute blowout because they just couldn't. And like Wisconsin's corners were pretty good and they just could not handle him at all. I mean, he's just a beast on contested catches. He can run stop routes and have the defender be like 10 yards behind him because they're so afraid of his deep speed. So yeah, I don't care one bit that he didn't test. I don't need to see anything more than
we don't need to. We have enough on the plate. Like, I mean, no matter how much you slice it, you can slice it as a production monster, and you love that. If you watch him for tape, you love that. if you're looking for analytics, I mean, he had a 48% dominator, was 95th percentile. He had nearly a 32% college target share, which is nuts, especially in college football in Ohio State with all the other options there. He's him, I believe, is the current term, Joel. If we're sticking with the times,
he is him.
He is certifiably him.
Just a couple real quick notes from someone who lives in Northeast Ohio and obviously is very familiar. Like, I'm not an Ohio State fan necessarily, but I get inundated with it here. So if you go back a couple of years ago when Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave were still there, like Brian Hartline, who was their receivers coach and is going to be a head coach very soon. He's a very good coach. He said Marvin Harrison was the best receiver he's ever coached, and it wasn't even close. And that's with Emeka Egbuka, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, all in that room. As a true freshman, he kind of did nothing until that Rose Bowl game against Utah when Wilson and Olave sit out, and he and JSN and CJ Stroud obviously just absolutely dominated as a freshman. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing not to like about him as a prospect. I've said I think he's the best prospect since Calvin Johnson. That maybe is a little unfair to Julio Jones, but when you're talking that class,
semantics, tit for tat. If you end up as Julio Jones instead of Calvin Johnson, I think people are okay with that. Vice versa.
Yeah, he's like 10 pounds lighter than Julio Jones, so maybe there's a better chance he doesn't end up with the lower extremity injuries that kind of derailed the end of Julio Jones's career. But yeah, just nothing to quibble about here at all.
Yeah, it's like you said. I struggled to find a flaw in his game. And you touched on a couple of the small ones, and I truthfully I didn't pick up on him. You got a more intuitive eye than I did, but he's great, and he's going to be awesome in the league. We don't need to spend all that much time on Marvin Harrison Jr. We know he's going most likely top 5 in the draft, and he'll be going number 2 in.
He is the best prospect in this class, regardless of position.
Yes, undoubtedly. Number 2, I'm going to go to Malik Nabers here out of LSU. Now, this guy, it's a common theme at this point. I'm not breaking news to anybody, but Malik Nabers fully deserves to be the wide receiver 1 of his own class. I am in love with Malik Nabers, and if Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't exist, I would have him easily as my wide receiver 1 because he is just standalone. There's nothing he can't do. He can get open. He is unbelievably good after the catch. He's a fine enough frame that I'm not worried about it. He can get open deep. He can get open short. And with that run after catch ability, he is unbelievably good at that. I view him in the same tier, which I don't know if I don't think it's outlandish in the slightest, but I think he's in the same tier as Marvin Harrison Jr. And I'll put my money on it.
Yeah, I've comped him to Tyreek Hill. I think that comp holds. Just because of his speed and his acceleration and his ability to just stop and start. So yeah, I mean, comparing him to, Marvin Harrison is basically comparing Tyreek Hill to like Julio Jones. Like, do you prefer one over the other? They're both great. Doesn't matter. So
yeah,
and there's really, I don't know what flaw you find in his game other than he's not physically physically dominant like Harrison is, but other than that, there's really nothing to not like.
Yeah, that's it. It's just a little bit more of a thinner frame. So my only concern is God forbid, and I have no reason to think that he won't, but God forbid, I'd just stay on the field. That's literally my only concern. And when I have those concerns with no injury history to make me worried about said concerns, those concerns alleviate into no non-concerns. How many times can you say concerns in 1 minute? I just set the world record. But yeah, I mean, listen, 34% dominator again, pretty much the same target share as Marvin Harrison commanded at nearly 32%. Broke out at 19 years old, crushed the combine with his 4.4. He's as sure thing as he gets. I genuinely have as much confidence in Malik Nabers working out as I do with Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, I want to ask you this question just because we're picking between hairs here. Let's say. Where's the dream landing spot for wide receivers in this class right now? Where would you say?
The obvious one is the Chargers. Even though we don't necessarily like the way the offense is going to line up, you've still got Justin Herbert
and a whole lot of opportunity,
0 target competition. I'll say that I think these top 3 guys are all landing spot proof and will make their teams and their quarterbacks better. So if one of them ends up with the Giants, I think that makes Daniel Jones better. And I think it's a situation where, again, like the Chargers, you have zero target competition. So is Wan'Dale Robinson target competition? No. I mean, these guys are just going to come in, dominate targets wherever they end up. Even if, I've seen a lot of mocks where Odunze goes to the Bears. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to probably go defense with that second pick just because they've got a defensive head coach. I think that's the way things are going to kind of line up. But if he does go there, I think he's more of an alpha than, and we should probably wait until we get to Rome Odunze, but he's more of an alpha than DJ Moore. And how many games is Keenan Allen going to stay on the field? He's just a different type of receiver. So I don't think there are bad. These three are so good that there are no bad landing spots.
Now, on the topic of that's what I was going to ask, of whether if there is a perceived bad landing spot, like let's say New England, the Giants, something like that, would that tilt if Marvin Harrison Jr. end up as a Giant or a Patriot, and Malik Nabers end up as a Charger? Would you have any consideration about taking Nabers over Marvin Harrison?
No, I wouldn't care.
I
think they're all transformational receivers.
And in theory, that's something that shouldn't happen anyway. But just want to run through that.
I mean, for portfolio purposes, I might be more willing to kind of spread out my exposures that way. But how many 101s or 102s are you going to get? Do you have that you're going to be able to get these guys with? So
we don't have 101s. We have 112s, man. We got 112s up in here. Gator adding Ayuk requested a trade. Did he officially request a trade? Because I was checking for that. I don't know if I don't think he officially requested a trade because I have been so on top of Brandon Ayuk news as a Steeler fan that desperately wants him to go for it. All I see is the what's it called? He did the unfollows on social media yesterday, which I know about. Which I know I
roll.
Yeah, I've seen it too many times at this point to put too much stock in it. But if Ayuk, let's play the game here. Where would you trade Ayuk for? I imagine among these wide receivers, he would easily be no worse than fourth. But would you take him over any of the big three?
No.
Would you? Okay, so then is he coming in at 4 then? Would he be the wide receiver 4 in this class? Right now?
That would depend on where Brian Thomas Jr. ends up because I think he's the pretty clear 4. So he would be kind of landing spot dependent. If he goes somewhere like Buffalo, if that's the trade up they make, I would probably take him ahead of Ayuk. Otherwise, he would be 4.
So
if 4 or 5.
If you're offered right now in one QB, the 104 for Brandon Ayuk, would you make that deal?
Right now, yeah, probably.
Interesting. Okay. I wasn't sure if you wanted to wait for the landing spot of Ayuk or see. Either way, he's going to be a Steeler. Everything's going to work out. Let's move on to Rome Odunze, the final of the big three here. Yeah, I've been vocal about how I'm not the biggest Penix fan. I honestly think Rome Odunze could have had an even bigger season if Penix hit a few more throws based on what I saw. And I'm not discounting what Penix did. Penix had a great season. I don't want to when we're going from, Kyle McCord, with Marvin Harrison Jr., I can't be too upset about having Michael Penix as a quarterback. Listen, I've watched a lot of film on the guys we're going to be talking about today. Michael Penix is far better than the other ones, but I think that's really one of the few differences between the two, between the three, is that I think he just had slightly worse quarterback play than Jane Daniels in LSU, and also Odunze. I think he's slightly worse after the catch than the other two. I think he's worse after the catch than the other two. Not that he's bad in any way, but I think it's something he has a little bit more room to work on than the other two. But again, we're picking hairs with these big three. So what are your thoughts on Odunze? I know you're a big fan.
Going into last year, I had him as my second ranked wide receiver in the class, ahead of Abuka and all those guys who, we thought were going to come out, but didn't. Obviously Nabers kind of surpassed him, but I've been a big fan for a couple of years. Just prototype boundary X type receiver, just exceptional on contested catches. I don't think he has kind of the flexibility that Nabers or Harrison have to kind of run on the inside, run slots, slot routes, stuff like that. So I think he's more limited, but he's really good at what he does. So I don't think that. Again, that's nitpicking. So
yeah, and then with all these big three, if we're mentioning negatives, it really is nipping. I mean, he's somebody that broke out with over 1,100 yards last year as a, so we're very excited for what Rome Odunze is going to do. Physically, he's right up there with all the other ones. We don't really have any. Do you have any downsides in this game that you wrote down? Because my only one was, I think, well, I guess you mentioned that he can't, you don't think he can play inside, which I agree with. I don't think he's elite after the catch, but he's still very good at it.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but it's not something I'm going to ding him for.
Oh, for sure. Right, like with all these big three that we're I'm writing down these notes, these negatives in pencil, and I'm prepared to erase them by the end of the show. But it's just something to point out, in case I don't know, just for semantics, more picking between the three greats here. And now things are going to get interesting though, because we're going to be diving into beyond the big three. We're diving into names beyond that, because there are going to be so many names here that give you so much value, because we all know these big three are going to be great. After that, we start having questions, and those questions are going to lead to fantasy value. Tyler bring up an awesome point in the chat, because I think this would be great, and it makes a lot of sense that the Jags would be a good spot for Ayuk instead of them drafting a rookie receiver. Yeah, I completely agree. I think the Jaguars could 100% do that. If they don't address the defense and maybe that secondary with a cornerback, if they want to go that way, I think trading a first for Ayuk would be a really great move. I think that would be awesome for fantasy too.
I don't think the Niners are going to get a first for Ayuk, just because of he's going into his fifth year or they picked up his fifth year option, right? So he's a free agent after this year.
Certainly. Yeah,
I think that's right. So he's going to be, you're buying him at a not cheap price. So yeah, I kind of doubt they would get a middle first where Jacksonville's picking. I think they'd pick 17.
Yeah.
So I don't think they could get that much for. Like, you can probably make a package or something where you get, where the Niners would give back something maybe. But I don't think straight up they're getting a middle first for him. But yeah, I think that'd be a very good spot. I mean, if you think about, you put him at the Z, and then you've got Christian Kirk to run slots, Ingram to run seam routes, tight end, and then you got Gabe Davis as kind of the boundary field stretcher. That would be a pretty ridiculous receiving core.
Would be nice, because we're waiting for that Trevor Lawrence leap to happen. Let's move on to the next name on the list here, and that is your guy, Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. So I'll let you take it away, because you're a bigger Brian Thomas guy than I
am. Brian Thomas is basically what let's say Christian Watson with two good hamstrings. He's kind of what we want Christian Watson to be. And I still a firm believer, obviously, and not giving up on him by any means, but we've seen elite production, like dominant level production from Christian Watson when he is healthy. I think Brian Thomas is kind of the exact same type of receiver, just 2 inches shorter, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches shorter, and not quite as exceptionally athletic as Christian Watson is, but still very, very good. Just exploded at the combine. He is, he's going to be a field stretcher. He's going to be an end zone threat. He's again, he kind of lacks the versatility that some of these guys at the top have, but I think he's going to be a really good player at the next level.
You know what's I love everything you just said, because if you don't mind, Joel, I'm gonna read you what I wrote about him in my little book, my little notebook. And by notebook, I mean notes app on my iPhone. Okay. Christian Watson 2.0 from a better program. Can he? Exactly. Can he get open downfield? Is he crazy athletic? Yes and yes. But he isn't a yak guy that I love. And I think there are limitations to his game that if he's a field stretcher, and he's a damn good one, because he's unbelievably big and unbelievably athletic at doing so. I worry about guys like that, because I think he is a little bit over dependent on being that athlete and that athleticism translating, and it should. He's a next level type. Like, he's a great athlete, like you were saying, but I worry that he doesn't have enough nuance in his game, and he's not, in my opinion, I don't love him after the catch to be able to be more than that. But that said, he did amazing things with LSU. Only 3 wide receiver duos at LSU have ever cracked 1,000 yards each. That was Jamar Chase and Oh my God, Jamar, help me, please.
Justin Jefferson.
Jamar Chase. Oh my God. Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and Odell and Jarvis Landry. Those are the only two duos that have cracked 1,000 yards prior to this duo right here with Nabers and Thomas. So, it's good company. It's very good company with what they did. But I don't know. I find myself a little bit lower on him. I'm not low on him. He's still my wide receiver 5, but I have concerns with him that his versatility, like you said, he is very limited to the outside, and I worry that he's Christian Watson 2.0 with the same level of inconsistencies of he can get things open downfield, but if he gets boundaried out, or if he goes against a physical corner that can run with him, I worry. I worry if he goes against a lengthy cornerback. But
yeah, I mean that's fair, but we've seen. Like you made the comparison, these Christian Watson coming from a better program, a more NFL style offense, instead of the very run heavy North Dakota State that Christian Watson came from.
Yeah.
So I think he's probably more refined. And we've seen Christian Watson improve on the things that we were concerned about. He hasn't stayed healthy, right? So, like I said, he's Christian Watson, fully formed Christian Watson, kind of without the hamstring concerns.
Yeah, and I like Brian Thomas a lot more than I liked Christian Watson coming out. So I definitely, like I said, he's still my wide receiver 5. I was considerably lower on Christian Watson at the time. But yeah, I mean, listen, we've seen the ceiling that Christian Watson has flashed. If Brian Thomas can come close to that on a consistent level and stay on the field, he's going to be a great value for fantasy football. Hunter asked a question in the chat here. In a 1 quarterback league, assuming Jane Daniel goes to Washington, which is actually what I think is going to happen, how much better is Caleb Williams than Jaden Daniels? Right now, you could take Daniels at the 110, but he knows Caleb will be gone should he trade up. In 1 quarterback, I would probably hold. And if you could take Daniels at the 110 and you really need a quarterback to do so, I would probably just take Daniels at the 110 instead of moving up in a 1 quarterback. But Joel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know how aggressive I would be trading up because I think you can probably I
think Caleb could be there at the 110. I think it's possible.
I think that's possible. I could see, I think you need to look at the teams in front of you and see what their quarterback rooms look like. Do any of them need quarterbacks? Like I would have a hard time seeing both Caleb and Daniels go before the 110. I think that's unlikely, but it's league specific. So yeah, I would look at the teams in front of you in the draft. Do they need quarterbacks? Because I think the priority is going to be on receivers. So, maybe get up, how much does it cost you to get up a pick or two, but I don't think you need to go up much more than that.
Yeah. And Joel brings up a good point as well of saying, well, you look at the teams ahead of you. That is always huge when you're considering trading up or who's going to fall to you, especially in 1 quarterback, because I often find in leagues that, there's a lot of teams that have good quarterbacks, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 good quarterbacks. And in 1 quarterback leagues, that means they're not taking Caleb Williams with the 1st round pick, or they're not taking Jane Daniels with the 1st round pick. So I would feel comfortable taking.
They shouldn't.
Yeah,
like you never know.
And
but
if they
you
do,
shouldn't.
and if they do, that means someone better is falling to you. So that's not the worst thing in the world. I'd probably hold at the 110. If you're like the back end of the draft of the 1st round is a very good place to be if you do need quarterback, because either a great prospect falls to you at wide receiver or even running back to an extent, possibly maybe in 1 quarterback, or you take one of these quarterbacks and you bolster that depth and you have that. Like I think you're definitely on the right track here of pairing Daniels or Caleb Williams with Jared Goff. I think that'll be a terrific duo. I think that would be a good pick for your team, but I don't think you need to spend more capital to get them.
And if you have Goff, if the worst happens and somebody takes Daniels, I think Drake May's fine. I think he's going to take some time to develop. I don't think he's going to come in and be like C.J. Stroud year 1. I think that's going to take some time, but I think he'll be fine eventually. So if you have Goff to get you through this year and then can kind of transition, and I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. So yeah, if you really want Daniels, maybe inquire and see what it would take to move up a pick or 2, which shouldn't cost much, but I don't think you have to go much higher than that.
Yeah, appreciate the question, Hunter. We really do, and
I appreciate
it as well. Let's move on to my guy of the class, Joel.
All right.
Adonai Mitchell. Now, oh my goodness, what a silky player. It's just, there's not much that he can't do. The separation he can get in the red zone is exceptional. What he can do after the catch, terrific. The build, not worrying to me at all. I'm a big fan of Adonai Mitchell, and from what I also watched, I firmly believe we talked about this before, but Quinn Ewers is just not him. I don't care what anyone says. Maybe something happens next year where it changes my mind, but this Texas team should have been in the playoffs. This Texas team should have been the standard with how much much weaponry they had around them, especially even on defense too. But yeah, Adonai Mitchell, I'm all about him. He's been a highly recruited guy for a while now, so I'm curious what you are thinking about my guy here in AD Mitchell.
My only concern is how our team's going to react to him saying that he didn't give 100% all the time. Now, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to agree with you very much in that I think Quinn Ewers is not quite as ass as Kyle McCord is, but he's pretty close.
Yeah. And of course, he's not Kyle McCord. I will clarify.
When we get to Xavier Worthy, it's going to be an even bigger deal because I think he left a lot of plays on the field with Worthy. Mitchell is tested out of the gym, had a great combine, has really elite body control. I mean, he can go get balls that you'd think he has no business getting to. It's just the production wasn't there. It was really inconsistent. And the dude admitted at the press conference at the combine that he didn't play 100% all the time. So your scouts, it's going to come down to how the scouts feel about this guy. And that's where his draft capital is going to come from. That's going to be a serious red flag to, the GM, the front office rooms, the draft rooms. So that area scout's going to have to bang the table and say, I really like this kid. There's a reason why he didn't go all out. It's going to change at the next level. That has to happen or the draft capital is not going to be there.
Yeah. Now, that is a big question.
That's a good thing. Maybe that's what happens in real life in the NFL and you get a bargain. Maybe that, drops his draft cap or maybe lower draft capital, drops his rookie draft positioning a little bit and you get a bargain in the late second round. I could see that happening. So, I like him quite a bit as well.
And that's also why I'm not so concerned about AD because I'm beyond confident he's going to get day 2 value, and I'm pretty confident he'll get round 2 value at the worst. And if you're a round 2 wide receiver in today's day and age, I don't care if you're round 2 or round 1. I'll take if I like the talent, I'm going to take the talent because the draft investment is just as significant. Someone's going to take a chance on AD, saying what a lot of receivers might already be doing, but not actually saying. It's certainly not a great thing to say. And I remember when he said that as well. But my receivers that I like, and for better or worse, this has a lot of hits and a lot of misses in this process, but guys that have great body control, are great after the catch, and can play outside and inside, I fall in love with. And that's what Adonai Mitchell is. It's somebody that you could play him in the slot, you could play him out wide, he can certainly get open, and you can make those fantastic catches like you said. So he's just such a well-rounded player with a good build of 6'2", 200 is something I'm all about personally. He can do it all, and guys that can do it all without a glaring weakness in limitation of how they can be used, I think that's gonna endear himself to quite a lot of coaches. Like I would do bad things, Joel, for him to be on the Rams, even if it took a year. He would be so good in that system, but that's just me. Tyler Binkley asking a good question as well in the chat here. Now that we've gone through the top 5 here, where would you rank JSN among these top 5? Is he lower than AD Mitchell, Brian Thomas? Is he higher than them? Because he's certainly not in the top 3, I would say. As much as I like JSN, but is he ahead of Brian Thomas Jr.? Is he behind? I'd put him ahead personally, but
man, that is a good question.
It is a good question.
I think it would like, where do we rank them? Again, where we draft them is going to be landing spot dependent. Where I would rank them, I would have him very close. They're very different types of receivers, right?
Yeah.
Brian Thomas Jr. is a
exact opposites.
A deep threat boundary guy, end zone, I think he's probably the better fantasy option than JSN is going to be. For JSN to be an elite kind of fantasy producer, he needs to be basically Cooper Kupp Jr., right? That he needs to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. He needs to be that level of player to be an elite fantasy producer because he's going to work primarily out of the slot. So I think there's a case where JSN's the better real world receiver, but Brian Thomas Jr. is the better fantasy player. So I think that would probably be the tiebreaker. But I think they'd be very close.
Yep. I think that's fair. Gator adding a good point. Don't forget to hit that like. And if you do, please do. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. Watch on YouTube if you want. That's where all these questions are coming in, and it's very fluid that way. And if you subscribe on
we
YouTube,
appreciate the questions for sure.
Yeah. Oh, we love the questions. We love the questions. So if you just watch on YouTube, hit that subscribe. There's a ton of great shows almost every single day with Club Fantasy that you certainly should check out, especially with draft just a couple of weeks away, Joel. Oh, Christmas is coming. Either way, let's move on to the next name on the list here, which I believe you have as Xavier Worthy. His teammate out of Texas. I really like Xavier Worthy too. And it's not double counting the speed, and that's an important thing to know. Everyone knows him for breaking the 40 time, the new John Ross, except he's nothing like John Ross in any way outside of the speed. Terrific talent out of Texas, has been, a name that we've been watching for some time, and some discussion of whether he gets in the first round thanks to that 40 time, whether he goes to on day 2, but certainly won't go beyond that. So I'm curious on what your thoughts on Xavier Worthy are.
I think he's pretty clearly going to go round 1. And you brought up the John Ross comparison. His other testing.
I want to clarify. I try not to talk over you, Joe. He is not John Ross. It's just the least.
I think it's important to differentiate him from those types of players in that his other testing was really good. I think he had like a 40 vert. He had a really good long jump too. So he tested like an elite athlete. It wasn't just he had a really good 40 time. Again, we talked about this with A.D. Mitchell. So much that Quinn Ewers left on the field with Xavier. Like Xavier Worthy's like a horror show, right? Where you kind of feel bad for you're kind of terrified for whoever's going to get slashed up by Jason or Freddie, right? It's like when you watch his film, you could see the D-back and you go, oh shit, that guy's not in position. He's going to get toasted. And Worthy would run by him and Quinn Ewers would just not even look at him. And it was massively frustrating. Very similar to Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison, toward there was a lot that was left on the field. The question is the 165. I mean, he's really small. I mean, can you survive in the NFL at that weight? I have no question about the game. The game is legit. It's just that small receiver bias, and he is really small.
Yeah, that's my worry. Right? That's the worry for all of them, of whether, could he go the route of Will Fuller, where we see all that talent on display, but he can't really stay on the field because the frame. I'm not saying.
Don't get me started on Will Fuller.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's Will Fuller, but I'm saying guys that have a lot of talent that were never able to reach their potential because they couldn't stay on the field because of a light frame. I'm right there with you though, and that is my only concern with him. He's my wide receiver 7 personally. His routes are actually nuanced. He isn't winning because of his speed. He wins because, if there are several times where I watched him where he has the good head movement that you want to see on a receiver, if he'll look to the right just slightly, and that's it. That's all he needs, because that's when the physical stuff takes over. And that's what I love in wide receiver prospects, are guys that they know how to get open and they know how to use their physicality to get open. They're not using it as a crux. They're not using it of, I have to run by him and I have to beat him that way. They're using it as, I'm going to make you think I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to make you look silly because my physicality is going to make you pay for that mistake of biting on that. And I'm so excited for Xavier Worthy. I really hope he gets a good landing spot. He is, in my opinion, I believe I wrote this down, that he's the most landing spot dependent wide receiver of this top 10 for me. I not that he can't succeed elsewhere, but if he gets put in a poor situation, like Frank, I'll be honest, if he goes to Pittsburgh, I'll be really I'll be happy as a Steelers fan, but I'm going to be really down for fantasy. And if I was objective, and I am objective, I do not like that fit. I do not have faith in the Pittsburgh using him right. But I'm curious about how wide do you think his range of outcomes are?
Yeah, I think it's really important for him that he gets somewhere that is going to be willing to kind of manufacture touches for him and get him balls in space. So yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah,
and Arthur Smith would be I agree with you. That would probably be a really bad spot for him.
I don't know why I said that, because it's just bad vibes. It's just really talking bad vibes.
And if you look at their draft history, like Pittsburgh doesn't like to take first round receivers. They usually would.
Things are different now.
Like to find guys later in the draft. So yeah, I don't think he's certainly not going to be someone they're going to take where they're picking. I don't think, and I think he'll be gone by the time they pick their second time. So I don't think that's a realistic option for them.
I will throw out there that I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if the Pittsburgh took a first round receiver. Things are different over Omar.
No,
with Omar.
I don't think he would be the guy they would take, though.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think it doesn't make sense to me either. But let's move on to another Xavier, and one that is quite polarizing in the draft community, and that's Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. What are your thoughts on him? Because I cannot make my mind up on him. He's got the size. He's 221. And he certainly was, easily the biggest part of South Carolina's success. But people worry about a lot of things with him. So what side are you on with Xavier Legette? Go.
I think he is the most landing spot dependent receiver of the guys that we're going to talk about. Because I think he needs to get to, like, the Debo comps are real. They're legit. And I think he needs to get to a system like that. He needs a Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur kind of landing spot that's going to use him on those like horizontal routes that are going to, where he can get different depths and just run crossers out of the slot, out wide, wherever, but you're going to line him up and utilize him in that way. I'd say whenever I watched Spencer Rattler, I was really disappointed in Spencer Rattler, but really impressed with Xavier Legette in that he just looked like the best player on the field when, at all times, really. So the Debo comps feel lazy, but I think they're legit. He's a very similar type of player. They're very similar type of size, and Debo came out of South Carolina as well. So if you look at them coming out, I think they were very, very similar athletes. So I think that's, if you get him in a system that's going to use him like the Niners use Debo, then I think that's a really good fit. And that's kind of my worry kind of player.
That's my worry about him, though, is that it takes a lot of investment that I don't know if he's going to get. I could see him being a third round guy, and if he goes to the third round, I don't think people are going to be engineering enough for him. And I also worry that I don't see the lateral quickness that Deebo Samuel had. And you can point out to the size of him being 220 plus pounds. He's a big boy, but I don't know if he's quick enough to make it all work on the next level, because you have to be such a unique type of athlete to do what Deebo Samuel does. And he could be that. He certainly could. It's what, it's why people like him right now. But the late breakouts, I have such a hard time trusting late wide receiver breakouts without explicit reason for doing so. But
I'm just going to say, if he goes to Atlanta, I'm going to be all over him.
Yeah, I mean, you can. Yeah.
I think he could really do some work there. And I think he got a need opposite, kind of underneath London and opposite Pitts. I think that could be again, Zach Robinson comes from the McVay tree. So I think that's like the perfect fit for him. They've got the opportunity. They've got the space for him. He's a great fit. So if that's like a spot he lands, I'm going to have a lot of Xavier Legette.
Yeah, I can talk myself into that, especially with the thought process of, the rushing ability and or the rushing opportunity that we saw, Robert Woods see in the with the Rams, or anybody else, even to an extent. And Gator bring up a good point as well of projecting wherever landing spot is of what's going on. Not leading too into landing spots of Gator also adding wouldn't be upset if Tampa got him in the third. And yeah, certainly wouldn't be. But it does matter to an extent. I think it's a nice thought that we can always be right about prospects of thinking that, yeah, he would have worked if he just went here. So I think we just need to, I think it's important to factor in a landing spot for the non-elites of the elites, because it matters. It matters what coaching staff is molding them. It matters what quarterback is throwing to them. It matters what opportunity they're going to have when they start out and whether they're going to be able to climb those ranks, because it's difficult for a JSN to go over a DK Metcalf or a Tyler Lockett compared to if he landed anywhere else in the NFL. And same thing with Zach Charbonnet. So I think those things are important to point out, even though we do love to just stick with our wide receivers. Let's move on to another big name here, a riser. And I understand why. I have come around a little bit on this lad, McConkey, out of Georgia, who I believe the consensus outside of the big three, easily the best route runner of this second group of receivers, getting round one talk. Georgia not obviously being the highest profile of passing, and you had a lot of Brock Bowers out there taking a lot of work, but Lad McConkey, what he put on film was terrific. And he's a hard player. He provides special team value. People seem to like him. It's what are your thoughts on Lad McConkey? Because it's another polarizing guy that people either love or they hate, it feels like.
I just can't get off the Adam Thielen comp. I think he's the exact same kind of player. He's a guy that, you think should be only kind of restricted to the slot. And he's kind of slighter than Adam Thielen coming out. But I mean, if you think about what Adam Thielen was with the Vikings in his early years, I think that's the same kind of player that McConkey is.
I think
he's a really good route runner. He can run on the outside, even though you think he's a slot only guy. So yeah, he runs those two-way goes as well as anyone. And we talked about the Senior Bowl, or we had Nate Pulvoet on, and he comped him to Cooper Kupp. I don't see that level in him. Because I think he's maybe a little bit too slight to kind of survive that, but very similar types of players.
Yeah, I to me, he's the definition of a chain mover. I think he plays bigger than his size. He's somebody that will make the contested catch. He'll make those tight, like if he has a quarterback that can hit a tight window, he's going to make a lot of those unheralded plays of getting first. Like if my fantasy league support a first down scoring, be all about Lad McConkey, because he's going to move some chains. Whether he's hit with the ball on a drag and takes it 5 yards down through contact or whatever he does because he's just pushing through, or if he's catching that 10-yard curl, because he runs really damn good routes. And it's not like Georgia can't produce wide receivers either. We've seen plenty of good wide receivers come out of Georgia. So I like Lad McConkey. I wonder what the upside is. I do. I agree with you that I certainly don't think Cooper Kupp is in the realm of outcomes, although he is certainly, a very good athlete to prove me wrong. But he does have the weaker wingspan. I think he'll be. He reminds me of Tyler Boyd. I think he's going to end up in a Tyler Boyd role, and whether that ends up where he's playing behind T. Higgins or Jamar Chase depends on landing spot of whether he gets stuck behind that situation or whether he could turn into maybe a Golden Tate type, which I think would be a lot of fun. But it really depends on a lot of these guys. But that kind of feels like it wraps up with Lad McConkey, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think you hit on it. He's going to be a chain mover, right? His route tree is kind of flat at the top, but he's really good at going, on those two-way go routes where he's either going inside or outside. So, yeah, I think he will be a guy who just creates a lot of first downs. And the guy, I can just see this guy making, sliding catches, just giving himself enough window to where, you can make that safe throw, and he goes down and gets a 5, 6, 7, 8 yard first down. So yeah, I think that's the kind of player he's going to be. I think he's got value. I think he's got more touchdown value than we're kind of giving him credit for.
I agree.
If you look at like what Adam Thielen did. So I think he's got that in. You say Georgia, it was really hard for him to kind of be an elite producer at Georgia because he's with Brock Bowers. He had A.D. Mitchell there for a while. it's just a run heavy offense. So I think he's probably I think his best production could be ahead of him.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's what a lot of people are counting on, given, the production he did put up, because it's not a stellar stat line, but everything we look at suggests Georgia situation. Tyler's got another great question. Tyler's got all the great questions today because I love this one. Are you moving up to draft any specific receiver in the wide receiver 4 to 8 range outside that big 3, or are they close enough to be happy with all of them? See, I love this question because I go back and forth because I love AD Mitchell. I do. I'm being honest about it. But will I move up to jump over any of these guys? I probably won't because I do think they're all in the same tier. I might view Brian Thomas and AD Mitchell ahead of the other ones. As much as I like Xavier Worthy and I like, Lad McConkey and I like guys like Troy Franklin and we're going to be talking about and things like that. What do you think, Joel? Would you move up to try to get a specific one of these receivers, or would you be happy with any of them? It's tough without landing spots, I know.
Yeah, I guess it's if you think about where they're going to be, like if you look at the rookie drafts, you're going to have probably 4 quarterbacks, maybe 5, maybe 6 go early. You're going to have Bowers in the top 8, depending on whether it's tight end premium or not. And then you're going to have the big 3 receivers. So you're talking like Brian Thomas Jr. is probably going to be, I think he's going to get, I think teams are going to draft him aggressively. I think he's going to go in the teens. So I think he's probably the clear 109 if you kind of lay the draft out. So like how much do you have to trade up for? Like, are you going from 201 to 109? Sure, I'd do that. I think he's my favorite amongst them. And I think he has the best chance to be an elite fantasy producer just because I think he's going to be a big red zone, end zone guy. And I think he's going to score a lot of touchdowns at the next level. So yeah, I would prefer him over Mitchell and Worthy. Like how's Worthy going to score? Like he's going to have to get a lot of manufactured touches. Yeah. So, I like the player, but I don't know how much of a fantasy producer he's going to be. And like Xavier Legette, as much as I like him, depending on the landing spot, I just don't think he's going to get the rookie draft capital that you really need to go aggressively get him. So would I trade up into, if I really wanted one, would I go to like 109? Yeah, I probably would. But yeah, again, what's the cost?
Yeah. And it always comes down to the cost with us, but, and it also, you want to be happy with your picks, and that's all something I always stress on these shows is, we might have these guys in a similar tier, but, maybe your team is built to take on more risk. Maybe that's the way you want to do it. And you want to go for that super high upside of Brian Thomas. That in both of our opinions, I think both of us agree that we don't think Lad McConkey has the top 10 ceiling. I think he could be a wide receiver 2. I think that's possible, but he probably won't jump that wide receiver 1 range where Brian Thomas certainly could. That, his physicality tells us that he can be a lot more than what we even saw already. So it's just risk assessment and also being happy with the players that you have on your team. You always want to, the biggest lesson I can give is that I learned the hard way is, you want to be happy with the guys you hit on, the guys you miss on. You want to be happy about both of them just as much of being content when you miss, because you don't want to take a guy you don't like and be wrong about it. That's how I ended up with Trey Sermon. Hunter asking a question here of if you're drafting 2 of these guys, who would they be for you? And we're going to get back to these receivers in a second, but so AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Troy Franklin, Lad McConkey, Jonathan Brooks. Without knowing landing spots, which 2 would you take? For me, it's tough because I really like all these guys. It's AD Mitchell for me, and I'll probably honestly, I'm tempted to just double up on Texas and bet on one of them working out. Honestly, I like them both.
Yeah, I think Mitchell is the clear one of this group. I would probably take Brooks. Assuming we were talking Jonathan Brooks here, I would probably take him in a second because I think year 1 may not be great, just coming off the knee injury, but we're hearing good things. So maybe he's ready for camp. I don't know. I think he's got the biggest fantasy upside. Like he could be an elite fantasy producer where, I think the rest of those players will be good players. I don't know that they'll be great players. And like Mitchell goes to Kansas City. That's terrifying. He could be really good. Just pairing him, with Patrick Mahomes and that off-platform stuff, I mean, that could be really good. So
Yeah.
I think he's got the most landing spots that really work out for him. And then, like I said, I think Brooks could be like a super valuable running back, assuming that knee is healthy. So like going into the second half of this year and going forward next year, I think he's got, like, last week we talked about how I think he's basically Breece Hall, except he didn't have the work. He doesn't have the experience. He didn't have 3 years to be the number one guy. So I think he's got legitimately that kind of upside.
Yeah. And the other part of Brooks that, I wouldn't push back on him before, he is also by far in both of our opinions. I think it's in both of our opinions that he's by far the best running back in this class. This is a weak running back class. We went through it last week, and certainly some names that we like, but it's the best of a lower tier that falls off very quickly at running back, and you will see that based on draft investment. Do you think A.D. Mitchell can be a wide receiver 1 before we jump back into our receivers?
Could be. I think
it's possible.
Talking fantasy, is he ever a top 12 wide receiver? I think that's in his range of outcomes. I don't think he'll be a consistent top 12 receiver, but I think there will probably be seasons where, like, he's another guy who's probably going to be he's really good in the red zone, really good end zone. He'll score a lot of touchdowns. So I could see him being a fairly regular top 12 receiver, just because I think he's got elite touchdown upside.
Let's move on to FSU with Keon Coleman. Someone that I really struggled to make up my mind on, because I liked him initially. I dove a little bit more into him the last couple of weeks. And I go back and forth on Keon Coleman out of FSU. Very good player who is surprisingly really like a lot better after the catch than I thought he would be given his size. But the lack of play speed is noticeable. It showed up on the 40 time, and it is noticeable on film as well. Like, I wrote it down before I checked and confirmed what his 40 time was. But what are your thoughts on Keon Coleman? I feel like you're a little bit colder on him than the average person.
Well, I think I'm warmer on him.
Okay, you're more warmer than the average. So that's why. That's trimmed the last one.
I think Josh was on, because I think the post combine show was when you were on assignment. So I think Keon Coleman was really bad at running the 40. I don't think he's slow. I think he's just really bad 40 runner. And that showed kind of with the GPS stuff when they did the drills. I think his play speed is much better than his 40 running time. I think if Keon Coleman goes to a place where they will use him as a big slot, I think he could be elite. Like, I think he could be like CeeDee Lamb level, Keenan Allen level, really good. If you try to put him outside, I think it's going to be a failure. And so, like, he's a great hands catcher. He really snatches the ball. I think his quickness is better than his speed. I think he's quicker than he's fast. He's really young. So I think he is role dependent more than he is landing spot dependent, because I really want someone to just put him in the slot and let him be a big slot and let him just kind of dominate over the middle. I think if you try to put him out, he doesn't separate really well. So maybe he can learn that. That's a tough thing to learn. It's tough to be faster. So like I say, I really want him to be a big slot, and I think he can be elite. Like, I think he can be a Keenan Allen level player if that's where you put him. If you try to use him outside, I think he's going to be a disappointment.
I love that, because I think that speaks to the concerns I have and the pros I have. I know you say you didn't see it on the play film. I did to an extent. And I think with that in mind, if you're matching him up again, if you can get him mismatched, I mean, the man's 6'3", 215, and he looks bigger than that. If you put him inside, he will bully a linebacker. He will bully a nickel corner. It will be such a. I'm right there with you, and like, I am shocked. I was shocked with how much I liked him after the catch based on his size, and and based on the play speed concerns I have, and yet he's still getting by people, and he's still running through people, still dipping and dodging. I like Keon Coleman. I do, but I am with you that I worry about how he's going to be used, because I don't like him on the outside. I'm with you there that I don't think he's going to win much on the outside, and maybe he gets put there in red zone situations, which I'd be fine with. But outside of that, the third and longs, I worry that people are going to put him on the outside because of that size. and I'm not in love with that idea.
Yeah, I think if you use him in ways where he's good, he can be really, really, really good. If you use him in ways he's not good, he's going to be a disappointment.
We are expert analysis here on this show. If we use him, okay. You're not wrong. You're certainly not wrong. Let's move on to Troy Franklin of Oregon, another guy that this was one of few that I watched, I wrote stuff down on, and then I went back to because I wanted to get another take on it. Because Troy Franklin, listen, I've been vocal about my love for Bo Nix on this show, and Troy Franklin was certainly a huge part of that, as pretty much the only show in town in Oregon, at least in the receiving game, that wasn't Berkey Irving out of the backfield. But I worry about the frame. What do you think about Troy Franklin?
Yeah, we shouldn't let the combine dictate or kind of overwhelm the film. But yeah, what did he measure? What did he weigh in? Like 176? It's really tough to be the kind of receiver that he was in college at that size in the NFL.
6'2", 176.
Yeah, to be
Not
that
great.
kind of boundary, deep boundary guy, essentially like Brian Thomas is. I think he's a very similar type of player. He just doesn't have that frame. And it's really, you have to be able to body guys in the NFL. You have to be able to go up and get contested catches. You have to be able to box those guys out and create space for yourself. And I'm just not sure that he can do that with that frame.
And that's something I noticed as well on film, was that I thought he got knocked off his routes at times. And I do worry about that, because I like a lot of the other stuff he does. He's great after the catch. He has, he's pretty good at at running routes as well. I love his route running ability. He's asked to do a lot of different routes. I think he's fairly polished, but yeah, the physicality concerns are what sticks with me, of whether he can hold up, because that is a horrific build. I mean, he's athletically, a freak of running a 4.41. He's got a good burst score. He has great dominator, great target share, broke out early. We have a pretty good, decent wingspan. There's reasons to like him. There's reasons to dislike him. I think that kind of is what leads us to saying, where do we want to see? Let's play that game. Where would you want to see him go? Where will he succeed?
I want to see him go to a place that has a really good receiver coach, because I think he needs to learn to do something he didn't do in college. He needs to be a Z. I don't think he can survive at X. And I think he needs to be, he needs to be moved around the formation. He needs to, be able to get balls in space. I think he needs to be schemed open. And so, I don't want him playing on the boundary.
Yeah, he's someone that I really struggled to think of a comp for. I don't know if you had that same issue, or whether you have a person in mind, but yeah, we just don't really see a ton of guys with his size, yet his frail frame, operate the way he does. He's coming in fairly polished in terms of the football mechanics. Of he was asked to do a lot of things, but from the outside, and we do wonder about whether that those abilities are going to be able to translate inside, because, like you said very, very accurately, it seems likely that he's going to get moved inside, unless we're going to talk about, the Devonta Smith effect of skinny, big, but still tall, certainly not the BMI guy that you want. But it works. It somehow works. Now, can he be an outlier? Devonta Smith's an outlier. So that's what Troy Franklin kind of has to be.
Yeah, I mean, is he as fast as Devonta Smith? I don't know.
No,
so
probably not.
I don't think he is. So yeah, I think that's probably his best case scenario, right? Is that he becomes Skinny Batman Part 2. So I mean, he's taller than Devonta Smith, but I don't think he's as fast. So yeah, that's probably his best case scenario.
I listen, if the NFL needs one more thing, I will be so happy if we have more Devonta Smith in the league, because he's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's move on to another Washington wide receiver here, and Jalen Polk. Someone that a lot of people like, ran obviously opposite of Odunze, and stood out to me on film when I was watching Odunze. A lot of people like him. Seems like someone possible to get day 2 value. With this class, do others push him down? It's possible. But he could be a round 3, round 4, maybe late round 2 guy, probably not. But what do you think about Jalen Polk?
I was it last week on the show that I made. I think he could be like Devontae Adams light, in that he's really good with his footwork on the line, and he uses his footwork to get really good releases and get himself space that way. I like Devontae Adams in like a 3-year stretch where he was the best receiver in the league. I don't think that's in Jalen Polk's outcomes, but I think he's very similar player. Like Devontae Adams wasn't a great athlete coming out. I think he ran like a 4.54 or 40 or something like that. So he wasn't a superior athlete by any means, but just became very productive because he was so good at creating space for himself with his footwork. I think Polk can be a similar kind of player. Not saying he's Devontae Adams again.
No, you're saying he's Devontae Adams now too.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, Devontae Adams was a late second round pick when the Packers took him. He was a late second out of Fresno. So I can see Polk getting similar draft cap. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a late second guy.
Yeah, I think it's a really good comp. I mean, we see and you're right on with the 40 time in comparison of, Devontae ran a 4.56. Polk ran a 4.51, I think? 4.52. It's a similar speed score, 6'1" to 203 versus 6'2" to 210. Yeah, and honestly, I was looking at player profile as I'm looking at right now, actually, and the comp that they gave him was Romeo Doubs, and I kind of love that pick, that comp. I think that makes a lot of sense. I see a lot of that in his game. I don't know if he's quite the route runner that Devontae Adams. I mean, Devontae Adams wasn't great. Wasn't that coming? I mean, it was inconsistent coming out.
Adams was really good coming out. He couldn't catch balls the first couple of years.
That was so crazy to think about. It was I like that. That was as I was beginning my fantasy career and early career. Devontae Adams, I didn't know better. I didn't know what the hell was happening. But yeah, no, Tyler's with us right now. We got our new 101 in this class. Jalen Polk has confirmed himself as Devontae Adams. So you can draft him and then put him on your taxi squad for 3 years, and then he'll become the best receiver in football. Yep. That's
no question.
That'll be the move. But let's think about a landing spot for him. Where would you want to see Jalen Polk go? Because, he does require some of that, that coaching up.
Yeah, I want him to go somewhere where he's like a number 2. I don't, he shouldn't be a number 1 but he's like a secondary kind of intermediate option. There's probably a lot of places he could go that makes sense. Like,
how about Indy?
I really want Indy to take Brian. I really want Indy to take Brian Thomas Jr. Okay. Is he that dissimilar? I don't know that he's that dissimilar from Pittman. So I think he might be a little bit redundant. So yeah, I don't think that's a great spot for him.
Okay. Yeah. He'll be interesting.
But again, I think that's kind of the player he could be. Mm-hmm. That's like his best case scenario.
Yeah. And I do agree with you that I think he's certainly a better 2 than a 1. And that worked out incredibly well for Washington with Odunze. So certainly would have experience in that type of role.
Like if he were speaking of Washington, he could go to Washington, D.C. and play like second fiddle to Terry McLaurin. I think that'd be a good spot.
That'd be good. Yeah, that would
like
be
the
good.
Early third. I think that'd be a nice spot.
Yeah, I think that could work out really well, especially. But is Jahan Dotson just going to live out that contract on the bench? Is that?
I don't see any reason to be optimistic. That's really sad. For someone who was buying him quite a bit last year, I've got a lot of shares that I don't want.
Yeah, I was hoping that. I mean, I don't have a ton of Dodson shares, but he was a fun college player. So either way, sure. Let's stick in the Washington in the realm here and go to Jalen McMillan. I noticed that you made a note of having him on this doc. I'll be brutally honest because I'm not going to say things I'm not capable of. I haven't watched Jalen McMillan yet. So what are your thoughts on J Mick?
So I like both of these guys, Polk and McMillan, quite a bit because they came from a pro style offense. Washington was very much a pro. Like they had Rome Odunze to work off of and someone who's going to take a lot of defensive attention. But I think they were both used in ways that they're going to be used in the pros. I think McMillan could be someone who can kind of run slot, run outside. Just a really versatile player who's, not necessarily great at anything, but good at a lot of things. And I think he's going to be fairly coveted at the next level just because he's really versatile. And, he can just, you get an injury outside, he can play outside. You get an injury inside, he can play inside. He's going to be able to mix and match. So I think a really versatile player that I think is going to be really kind of coveted at the next level.
Yeah,
And just
I mean,
kind of fills out your receiver room and gives you a lot of versatility.
yeah, I mean, 559 receiving yards in just 9 games. Yeah, he broke out last year with that 1,100-yard season, 9 touchdowns. So, we've seen more production out of him when he had more of the target share to work with, and obviously Rome Odunze is going to command what Rome Odunze will. I think he's going to be very interesting to see where he gets draft capital because he feels like a day 3 guy, but if someone falls in love with him, whenever we see these guys that, maybe the final year isn't exactly what we dreamt of, but we saw him before, and we have reasons to say why, wasn't as productive in that final season. And NFL teams still fall in love with those guys. So it's very possible. I'll be very curious to see where all the Washington people go because, like you said, it's a pro style system, and there still aren't too many of those in the college game. So
I think both Polk and McMillan are going to go higher than people think.
I agree with Polk, and obviously, like I said, I haven't looked at McMillan yet to know for sure, but want to move on to a few other names here because we're over the hour mark, and despite what Gator said very kindly, that we could make the show last another hour, and we certainly could. We can make it 2 hours with how many good receivers there are in this class, but for the sake of everyone's time and the ability for people to rewatch, let's move on to Roman Wilson out of Michigan. Somebody that I believe was in, because Dane Brugler of The Athletic released The Beast this past week. That's his big deep dive into the draft class, which I hold Dane Brugler and The Athletic in very high regard. Roman Wilson was a top 50 prospect for him. A lot of people are liking Roman Wilson. What are your thoughts on him?
Super productive in college. He's just, you got to get over or I have to get over my small receiver bias because he's not very big. So, but he was, again, Michigan ran a very pro style offense. And he was very productive in that system. So, yeah, I could see, again, if he goes to the right place where he can be utilized correctly, I could see a productive NFL career out of him.
Yeah, you're kind of asking the same questions that you asked, or that we currently ask of JJ McCarthy, of how much is he capable of, but just wasn't totally asked to do because of how Michigan runs their offense. Because Roman Wilson was Michigan's passing game. I mean, he had a 40% dominator. If they passed the ball, it typically went to Roman Wilson, which is why if you watch JJ McCarthy, you're probably doubling down and also watching Roman Wilson. But it's like you said, people who need to understand, or they need to wrap their head around the size. The size is, going to be an outlier type of situation if he needs to. It's not the prototypical size. He's 5'11", 185, certainly not a good wingspan either, but he's a good athlete. He's got the speed. So what do you, he's going to be 23 within a few months. Do you think he gets, I'm pretty confident he gets day 2 value, but how high do you think his ceiling is? I think that's the big question people need to ask when we're taking this type of risk.
I think you're basically looking at hoping for a Tank Dell kind of outcome. I think that's certainly possible, but I don't know that it ever gets much more than what Tank Dell did last year. So I don't ever think he's going to be a number 1 option of an NFL offense.
Yeah. And I think that's okay though. I think I certainly don't think he's a wide receiver 1 either. And I wouldn't really make sense to me at that, but would you agree that he still could? I'm trying to think about where I see him succeeding, and he almost, it's not a good comp. I don't like this, but Tyler Lockett a little bit starting out. Maybe.
I don't know that he has the deep speed that Lockett does. I think he's more of an underneath guy. So yeah, I don't think he has the kind of explosivity that Lockett does.
Yeah, that's it. That's fair. That's fair. I agree with that. But it'll be interesting to see where he goes. I can get my head around some of these smaller, fast guys. I was a Josh Downs fan. I still am a Josh Downs fan. I was a Paris Campbell fan before that. I've been hurt, and I'm still willing to be hurt again. I'm not over it yet. Tyler asked, what do you think about Jermaine Burton? See draft projections all around for him, and yeah, that makes sense because we I mean, Jermaine Burton was somebody that we, like in an ideal world where everything worked out for Jermaine Burton, we would have talked about him already, right? I mean, he was supposed to be a lot better than he ended up being, at least production wise. So, what do you think about him, Joel?
You want to talk about your prototype Steelers receiver? Somebody who's going to good player, but I think he's probably going to drop because I think there's some real off-field concerns with him, kind of like Pickens. So I don't think he's as good a player as George Pickens. Don't get me wrong, but I think Pickens was a first round talent who fell to the second round because of the off-field concerns
and the injury,
But I think primarily because of the off-field concerns. I think Burton's a very similar type player in that he'll probably go about a round lower than he probably should because of the off-field concerns. And that's where Pittsburgh likes to get their receivers, right? They like to take like Deontay Johnson was a third round receiver, I think. So
yes.
Yeah, I think that's probably just feels like a Steelers receiver to me. And if he goes to a place like where you've got a Mike Tomlin, where you've got that kind of disciplinarian level coach where he's not going to take any BS. Hopefully the off-field stuff is, much ado about nothing and it's not a problem, but hopefully that, just doesn't, he goes to a place where he knows that stuff's not going to fly and he can just focus on football.
Yeah. And I agree with all that. I want to talk about two more names here I want to get to. And one of them is someone I tweeted about yesterday, and I'm hoping that you can help me out here, Joel. Because if we're talking about somebody that might fit Steeler football, for me, that's Malachi Corley. Because his blocking, he's the best blocking receiver in this class, in my opinion. He gives a ton of effort in his blocks. He will go downfield. He will block he'll block when balls go to other receivers. He'll do whatever. Outside of that, I don't see it. I don't get it. I don't get why people like Malachi Corley, and I'm hoping that you can help me out because I didn't outside of he has great acceleration. Sometimes he showed some nice nuance. It was inconsistent, but he doesn't run a lot of different routes. He's solid after the catch, and his quarterback sucked. That's my profile for him on the pro side. And I just see a lot of negatives in his game that I don't see him as an NFL player. And I feel like I'm 100% missing something. So please help me out.
I don't think I can because I kind of agree with you. I just he's a player that you really wanted to go to the combine and kind of blow it up, and it just didn't happen, right? I thought he was taller than 5'11". He's 5'11", 215. He ran a 4.49 40 with a 159 10 split. Like I put a lot of value in the 10 split, and that's really bad. So, and for the kind of player he's going to be, like he's going to be a slot. The kind of player we talked about with Legette, where he's kind of going to play slot seam routes and just run crossers and stuff like that. I want more acceleration than that, and I agree with that. I think it seemed like he played faster than that, but that's a really bad measurement. 422 shuttle. I didn't see the testing. I wanted more out of the testing, and for a small school guy,
that's the other big part of it is
I think that's really going to tank his draft value or his draft capital.
Like he was having and the amount of times if he ran downfield, he got thrown off so many routes. I'll be honest, if he got hit downfield, the 5-10 yards where maybe it's iffy of whether, you give some cornerback some leeway of whether those hits, he's out of the play. He's out of the play too often. And these are not great defenses he's going against. Sure, his offense isn't great either, but if he's an NFL level talent, we see him post 1,000 yards. He took a step back this year compared to production wise, compared to what he had before, granted in 2 less games, but I was disappointed. I was expecting to see a small school guy that dominated, that I would have had to talk myself into saying he can do it against better defenses as well. And I saw a guy that certainly made his hay off of screens and at a small school.
Yep.
So I don't see it. I see him as a late day 3 guy, round 5. We send him to San Francisco. I think that would be the perfect spot for him. I'm not even just saying lazily send him to San Francisco because of screens and stuff. I'm saying because of the blocking as well. I think he'd be a great fit for what San Francisco does there, just as a football team. But fantasy-wise, I don't see it. And I really wanted to. I really wanted to with Malachi Corley. Because I always
He didn't
liked
play like
Malachi.
a guy who was 215. That's
No, he did not. Just he's so weird. It's like I don't know what to focus on with him, and that's always tough. And he's also he's 22, which I'm not going to weigh into that. That's fine. But that's another thing. Now, the other name I wanted to get to, and I'll ask you as well if there was any that you wanted to, but Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. That's one that I want to talk about because that's another person that was inside the top 50. I was surprised he was inside the top 50, but he was inside the top 50 for Dane Brugler among all prospects. So this is somebody that the Athletic values quite a bit. He obviously blew up the combine in a very fun way, running a 4.41, having good speed burst scores. He really did it all. Never the biggest producer at Florida, but steadily improving with each year. So what are your thoughts on Ricky Pearsall?
He's a tall, skinny slot, but he's good. Like you said, he tested out of the gym. He was very productive at Florida. So yeah, I think there's a chance. Does he get the draft capital? I could see him getting top 50. I wouldn't be surprised. I like him as a player. I don't love, again, like with these slot guys, your bar to be, fantasy relevant is, can you be an Amon-Ra St. Brown? Can you be a Cooper Kupp level player?
Do you think he's
I like him.
I don't know if he's only slot. I was just looking it up as well. He played 62% of his snaps from the slot. Obviously, that is highly suggestive of where he'll end up, and he's got that lighter frame. But I think he could play out wide.
What did he weigh? Like 190, 191, something like
182.
That? Okay, even less. Yeah, I mean, how does he not get redirected? How do you not just put someone up at
189? Sorry, 189. 6'1", 189 is the measurement.
190. I still think he's going to get bumped off his routes if you try to put him outside. So, yeah, I think you could line him up there and he wouldn't be embarrassing, but I don't think it's somewhere he's going to live. So, I think he's going to be a primary slot guy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm going to watch a lot more film on him this week, probably when I get to the gym in a little bit, actually, and just dive a little bit more into him as well. But I mean, my biggest concern for him, honestly, isn't necessarily that he might be a slot only. It is just that he's turning 24 in half a year. He'll be 24, and I believe it's October. Not great for somebody that we want to have a huge. If we think he could get day 2 value, he's going to be 24. And we're not exactly sure where his role is on the football field, whether he's inside, outside, whether he can play both, whether he's only going to do inside. We do have those question marks. So when we have those question marks, we have to wonder how many of those NFL teams do, and we'll see how that gets reflected in draft capital. But the fact that I think
he'll be a very good real life player. I'm not sure how good a fantasy player is going to be.
Yeah, that's fair. And I feel like that sentence, I almost want to do a whole show on that at some point, because I feel like we say it all the time, and I've said it for years. But how often is that actually true? How often is it true that somebody's a good real life player that isn't usable for fantasy as a receiver? Juwan Jennings, I guess.
I mean, I think it's because they run the slot. He's not going to be a 2 receiver set guy. He's going to be a 3 receiver set, and that's more prevalent in the league now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah,
but I mean, even if you're running 55, 60% 3 receiver sets, that's 40% of the snaps that he's on the sideline. So, if he gets to like a run and shoot kind of offense where they're going to run 3-4 receiver sets 70-80% of the time, then you can see it, but it's really hard to do when you're only playing 60%. Be a fantasy contributor when you're only playing 60% of the snaps.
Yeah, and that'll be the question. I think that's the biggest thing of whether you like Ricky Pearsall or not is whether you think he is going to be limited to that snap role. If he is only playing the slot, then you're completely right. He's 11 personnel only. They might get to the red zone, go to 2 wide receiver sets, he's off the field. You're talking 40, 50% of snaps, and you're not enjoying that, especially as a 24-year-old prospect that might already be close to his ceiling. So that's the concern. The other side of it is whether you can play outside, and he does push outside and can make that work. But you're right that, the frame certainly isn't ideal. The wingspan isn't great. Physically, he's not unbelievable outside of the athleticism part of it. I'm just saying, like, looking at him, he's not terrific. So, but athletically, he's fantastic. So, really good RAS score. So we'll see where he ends up. He is somebody that I think will surprise people by draft capital. And I think that's what I use these, people like Dane Brugler and people that are in the know. I take their insight incredibly well, and I also double it into where they might go in the draft. They're not wrong often, especially at this stage of the top 50. So Ricky Pearsall probably going to get day 2 value. So someone to keep in mind as well. But yeah, any other names that you want to talk about, Joel, before we wrap this one up?
A couple real quick. Malik Washington out of Virginia. He's like a 5'8", 200-pound slot guy.
That's another
I
person.
think he's someone who, yeah, he's really, I think he's not going to get good draft capital. He's probably a 5th-round guy. But I think he's someone who's really interesting. The other one is Jordan Whittington, kind of the 3rd receiver out of Texas. He's kind of the Roshan Johnson of receivers in that he was playing behind not playing behind, but he was playing with 2 other, much better players, and just didn't really get a lot of opportunities, but I thought he was really productive when he got targets. So he's more productive than I think someone playing with 2 guys like Worthy and A.D. Mitchell, and with a quarterback like Quinn Ewers deserved to be. So I think he's someone, if you're looking for someone kind of really under the radar, I think he's someone who could kind of break out at the next level, if he gets the opportunity. So if you're looking for like a 4th round rookie draft guy, that's the name to know.
I'll throw out one more as well. That's Javon Baker out of UCF. I have not made up my mind whether I like Javon Baker or not, but because the testing was very disappointing compared to what we were hoping for as an athlete. But I mean, the production was exceptional. He dominated for UCF. He commanded a 34% target share. That's among the best in this class, relatively to the opportunity available. So, I have reasons to like him. 6'1", 202 is right up my alley in terms of guys I like with a 32-inch wingspan. But the speed wasn't what we were hoping for. We were hoping for more of, more quickness, more long speed, just really more of everything. So can he succeed outside the college ranks where he obviously made his hay? That kind of remains to be seen. Probably will be mid-day 3 guy is what I'm guessing where Javon Baker ends up, because he's one of those day 3 guys that I don't think will take a lot of time if he is him. Like if he is what proponents think he is, we'll see that early. And if not, I don't think there's a ton of waiting around to do with someone like Javon Baker. Yeah. Either way, Joel, we just ran through all these amazing wide receivers. And we went an hour 23 and felt like we could do another 30 minutes, but for the sake of everyone's lovely Sunday, including yours, including mine, I think it's time to take a breather here. That's kind of wrapped up our wide receiver ranks and wide receiver talks of this class. We tried to go a little bit deeper because of how deep this entire class goes with the Jalen McMillans, the Roman Wilsons, the Ricky Pearsalls of the world. Joel, any final thoughts for you with before we dive into tight ends next week?
No, I think we covered. I think we got the big ones. But yeah, I think it was a good process on your part to kind of glaze over the top 3 because they are so elite, and there's not much more that needs to be said about them, even though we probably talked about them more than we needed to. But this is like, pick your flavor. There's a lot to like about this class.
It's going to be so fun. And I'm already excited for the summer when we're going to get all those rookie minicap headlines of where they're lining up and how teams see them and the coach speak that's going to come from all of it. Oh, I can just get giddy all day long here, Joel. Good to see Tyler. Thank you for joining in yourself. Thank you for Gator for joining in, for Hunter for joining in, everyone else.
Thanks to everyone. Appreciate it.
We really do appreciate it. It's been awesome to watch kind of the views going up a little bit over the last few months as we're diving into all this amazing offseason content. So thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back next week, next Sunday, diving in once again into the tight ends before the draft. Just a couple of weeks away, Joel. A couple of weeks
11
away.
days.
Who are the Packers taking?
I think it's edge rusher or trade out.
Okay, all right. Well, not fantasy relevant, so we don't care.
I don't think they're going to take a fantasy relevant player early. Maybe they'll probably take a running back at some point. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what a fun time it will be. Either way, thank you all for tuning in. It's been a blast. I've been Michael Sicoli. You can follow me at Michael__Sicoli. You can follow Joel here at the Joel Wirth. And of course, be sure to follow Club Fantasy FFL at Club Fantasy FFL on Twitter. Hit that subscribe for YouTube. It really does help quite a bit to do that. And also, you get to see all the amazing other shows that come out of Gators tomorrow, Mocking with the Stars at 10 p.m. So be sure to tune into that. All the amazing stuff coming here in Club Fantasy FFL. So without further ado, thank you all for tuning in. Remember, Dynasty, it's like a disco ball, keeps on spinning year round. So join the club every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, right here on Club Fantasy FFL. Stay healthy.